He wasn't supposed to vanish, but he did. His name was Marcus Cole. To the world, he was a titan, a black CEO whose name appeared in glossy magazines, a man who spoke in boardrooms with the weight of millions behind his words. But here, on the streets, his name meant nothing. Here, he was just another man with a torn coat and weary eyes, invisible to those who hurried past. The city swallowed him whole, and no one cared to ask why a man like him had chosen to disappear into its alleys. It began on a cold Tuesday night, the kind of night when the sky pressed heavy against the earth and the air carried the bite of coming rain. Marcus sat against a brick wall outside a half-shuttered convenience store, his cap pulled low, his hands gripping an empty cup. Footsteps echoed on the pavement. A group of young men in tailored suits, fresh from some downtown office, noticed him. "Look at this one of them sneered, kicking the cup so it rattled across the concrete. "Begging for scraps," another laughed. "Bet he hasn't seen a shower in weeks." Marcus lifted his head, eyes calm despite the insults. His voice came low, steady. "You don't know where I've been." "Don't need to," the first replied. "You're here, that says enough." "Maybe," Marcus said softly, his tone sharper than they realized. "But sometimes you learn more from being here than anywhere else." They scoffed, shaking their heads, moving on. To them, he was nobody. But Marcus had heard what he needed, the casual cruelty of men who had never known hunger, who had never slept with one eye open in fear, and that was why he was here. Days earlier, in the glittering lobby of Cole Dynamics, Marcus had overheard whispers that made his stomach turn. Executives mocking the lower staff, managers ignoring workers who were struggling, and worse, word that his company had been partnering with investors who saw the city's most vulnerable, not as people, but as obstacles. He had built his company to lift, not crush, yet something had gone wrong. "You want to understand the truth, Marcus?" Naomi, his oldest friend, had told him. "Then step out of your tower and live it. See what they see. Feel what they feel. Otherwise, you'll never know how deep the rot goes." And so he had. He left behind the penthouse, the suits, the car. With nothing but a backpack, he vanished into the world most ignored. The first night broke him. Cold seeped into his bones. Hunger clawed his stomach. The silence was louder than boardroom debates, heavier than quarterly losses. But he endured. And by the second night, he wasn't alone. "You knew?" a voice asked, scratchy, suspicious. Marcus turned. A wiry man with tangled hair and darting eyes crouched beside him. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "Name's Raymond," the man said. "Out here, you survive by knowing the rules. Rule 1, never fall asleep with your shoes on. Someone'll take 'em. Rule 2, don't trust smiles. Rule 3, always keep moving, even when you got nowhere to go." Marcus nodded, listening. Raymond tilted his head, studying him. "You carry yourself different, like you used to matter." Marcus smiled faintly. "Everybody matters." Raymond chuckled bitterly, but something in his gaze softened. The nights blurred. Marcus followed Raymond's advice, learning where to line up for soup, which alleys were safe, which shelters locked you out if you showed up a minute late. He learned hunger's voice and the cruel rhythm of being overlooked. But he also met Aisha. She was 27, a mother with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. One evening, she tore her last piece of bread in half and handed it to Marcus. "Why would you do that?" he asked quietly. She shrugged. "Because tomorrow someone might give me something when I've got nothing." He stared at her, humbled. And then there was Malik, a teenager, no older than 16, who slept with one sneaker because the other had been stolen. Yet even in hunger, Malik dreamed of music. He beat on trash cans, hummed melodies, plucked guitar strings that weren't there. "You think I'm crazy?" Malik asked one night, grinning shyly. "No," Marcus said, "I think you're a genius." These moments kept him alive. But not all moments were kind. One evening, drawn by the scent of fresh bread, Marcus found himself outside a café. His reflection looked back at him from the glass ragged, hollow. That's when he heard the mocking voice. "Well, well, well. Look who we have here." Marcus turned. His heart sank. It was Derek Holloway. Wealth dripped from him, the expensive suit, the gold cufflinks. Derek, the man who had once tried to buy Marcus's company, who had been humiliated when Marcus refused. "Marcus Cole?" Derek said loudly, making sure everyone inside could hear. "No, couldn't be. Cole's a genius. Cole's a big shot. And look at you. Filthy, broken, begging for scraps. Laughter rippled in the café. Marcus lowered his eyes, heat rising in his chest. Sometimes, Marcus said softly, you learn more with empty pockets than full ones. Derek barked a cruel laugh. Is that your wisdom now? Maybe you were never as smart as they thought. Maybe this is who you always were, a fraud. Marcus's hands tightened. He wanted to shout, to tear the mask off right then. But he swallowed his pride. You'll see, he murmured. The truth always finds its way. For the first time, Derek's smile faltered. But he covered it quickly, waving Marcus off as trash. That night, Marcus lay awake, Derek's words echoing. Fraud. Nothing. Trash. Yet when he looked around and saw Malik humming quietly, Aisha cradling her child, Raymond muttering in his sleep, he knew who the real fraud was. Days turned to weeks. Marcus saw things he would never forget. A man collapsing from hunger while passers-by stepped over him. A girl crying silently when her blanket was stolen. A boy covering his mother's body with a trash bag after she froze in the night. But he also saw kindness. A stranger leaving food near the shelter. A homeless woman braiding another's hair with patient hands. Malik singing under the moonlight, his voice carrying hope into the darkness. And then came the night of Derek's charity gala. The hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers, sequins, and the hollow laughter of the wealthy. Derek stood center stage, boasting of his generous contributions to the homeless. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek said, raising his glass, we must do our part for the less fortunate. They are, well, let's be honest, a burden, but we with our means can at least make them less of an eyesore. Polite laughter followed. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. He walked into the ballroom wearing his tattered coat, mud on his shoes, cap pulled low. The crowd gasped. Whispers shot through the room. Who let him in? Security! Derek roared. Get this trash out of here! But Marcus's voice rang out, clear, cutting through the noise. My name is Marcus Cole, CEO of Cole Dynamics. Silence. Absolute silence. Gasps. Eyes widened. Cameras clicked. Derek staggered back, his face draining of color. No. No. This is a trick. Marcus stepped forward, each word deliberate. No trick. I went undercover to learn, to feel, to know. And what I found was this cruelty, indifference, arrogance. Men like you who mock the people they pretend to help. The real eyesore isn't them, Derek. It's you. The room erupted in whispers, gasps, shock. Aisha, standing in the back, wept silently. Malik's mouth hung open. Raymond clapped once, loud and firm, his voice breaking through. That's him. That's who he really is. Derek's lips trembled. You'll regret this. Maybe, Marcus said, eyes locked on him. But I'll never regret caring. The applause began softly, then swelled, filling the ballroom. But just as triumph washed over Marcus, he felt a hand clutch his arm. Raymond, his eyes wide, wild. Marcus, he hissed, voice trembling. You don't understand. This goes deeper than Derek. You've stirred something you can't control. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about? Raymond leaned closer, his grip desperate. They're coming for you. If you stay another night, you won't live to see the morning. Raymond's grip on Marcus's arm tightened with a trembling urgency, his eyes reflecting something more than fear, something Marcus had seen only in men who had stared into abysses too deep for the rest of the world to comprehend. And Marcus held his breath, not because he feared what Raymond might say, but because he knew whatever came next would change everything he thought he understood about Derek, about the streets, and about the role he himself had chosen to play as an undercover wanderer of broken pavements and broken souls. So Marcus whispered low, What is it, Raymond? What could possibly be darker than a man like Derek? And Raymond leaned closer, his voice raspy, tasting of stale smoke and long nights without peace. Derek's just a pawn, Marcus. Just a flashy, loud pawn that everyone sees. But there's someone else. Someone who pulls the strings. Someone who feeds off of men like us and laughs when we tear each other apart. Derek is dangerous, yeah. But he's only the mask, hiding something worse. And Marcus felt the words sink like stones into his chest. Not because he was surprised, But because part of him had known from the start that Derek's cruelty was too shallow, too performative to stand alone, there had to be a deeper rot feeding the cruelty of the city, and Raymond's shaking hand was proof of it. Yet before Marcus could respond, the clattering of a trash can echoed from the alley mouth and Derek's sneering voice spilled into the shadows. "Well, well, well, what do we have here?" My two favorite actors, whispering secrets in the dark like schoolgirls care to share with the rest of the class. And the moment shattered, the fear in Raymond's eyes replaced with a survival instinct as Derek swaggered closer, flanked by two men Marcus hadn't seen before, taller, harder, the kind of men, shoulders heavy with the knowledge that the man he had thought a fellow sufferer was something else entirely, and Marcus let him go, knowing trust had fractured, maybe beyond repair. Alone now, Marcus leaned against the wall of the alley, the shadows pressing in, and for the first time since he had walked away from the lights of the ring, he questioned whether he had been naive to think he could walk unnoticed in the gutter, because the truth was, men like him left trails, not footprints, and trails always led hunters to their prey. Still, he could not walk away. Not now. Not when Derek's shadow was growing. Not when whispers of a hand above Derek promised a darkness deeper than he had imagined. And not when people like Aisha and Raymond and the countless nameless others still fought to survive one night at a time. He clenched his fists, feeling the old itch of the fighter beneath his skin, the ghost of a man he had sworn to leave behind, and he whispered into the empty alley, "If the board is set, then I'll play. But not their game. Mine." The city did not sleep that night. Not really. Though the streets pretended to with their empty sidewalks and the dim flickers of street lamps buzzing like tired eyes. Marcus stood in that alley, his breath visible in the damp air, his voice low but sharp as he whispered to himself that he would not play their game, he would play his own. His fists clenched at his sides, but he forced them open, forced calm into his body because calm was what had always saved him. Back in the ring, back when the crowd wanted blood, and his opponent wanted to see him crumble. Raymond's hand still trembled from where it had gripped Marcus's arm. "You don't understand," the older man muttered, his voice hoarse, his eyes darting like shadows chased across a wall. "It's not Derek. Derek's just a dog on a leash. The one holding the chain, that's who you should fear." Marcus turned to him slowly, measuring his words, letting silence cut between them. "Then tell me, Raymond, who's holding the chain?" Raymond swallowed, his throat working as though the truth itself was jagged glass he didn't want to spit out. "Names ain't safe here. Not yet. You speak it out loud. You paint a target on your back." Marcus stepped closer, his presence steady but intense. "Raymond, I've already got a target on my back. Derek made sure of that. You think hiding the truth will keep me safe? No, it'll just keep me blind. And I don't walk blind." For a moment, Raymond looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump or to be pushed. His lips quivered before words tumbled free in a whisper. "They call him Mr. Kane." The name slithered into the night like something alive, something venomous. Marcus repeated it softly, tasting the weight of it. "Mr. Kane." The syllables felt like cold metal between his teeth. "And what does this Mr. Kane want with a man like me?" Raymond shook his head, eyes full of dread. "Not you. Us. All of us. He owns half this city in ways nobody writes down. The shelters, the soup kitchens, even some of the charities money flows back to him. He plays savior by day, predator by night. Derek? Derek just runs errands, collects dues, roughs up whoever forgets the order. But Kane, he decides who eats and who starves." Marcus exhaled slowly. A memory flickered across his mind like a blade of light. A tournament ring, a roaring crowd, and his opponent's manager leaning in with a quiet bribe, an offer for Marcus to throw the fight. He had said no, and that no had cost him more than he could admit. "So Kane thinks, he decides," Marcus murmured. "We'll see about that." Raymond grabbed his sleeve, desperation thick in his voice. "Don't be a fool, Marcus. You don't pick fights with ghosts. Kane ain't like Derek. Kane's the kind who smiles at your funeral because he already collected what he wanted before you died." Marcus pulled his arm free, not harshly, but firmly. "I've been underestimated my whole life, Raymond. I know how to survive men who smile at funerals." He turned then, walking out of the alley, as if the darkness itself parted for him. Raymond stayed frozen in place, muttering under his breath. "You don't know the game you're stepping into. God help you, boy." The days that followed moved like storm clouds gathering. heavy and expectant. Marcus worked alongside Aisha at the soup kitchen, his hands steady on the ladles, his smile warm with the children who came for bread and beans. But beneath it all, his mind was calculating, listening, watching. Derek hadn't shown himself since the alley, but Derek's absence was no comfort. It was strategy. Malik noticed it too. One evening, as they stacked crates of donated clothes, Malik leaned in, whispering, "You feel it, don't you? The quiet before something hits?" Marcus smirked faintly. "You got good instincts." Malik shrugged. "You live out here long enough. Instincts are all you've got." Marcus studied the boy, saw a spark in him, the same spark he'd once carried at that age, before betrayals and backroom deals dimmed it. "Hold on to those instincts. They'll save you." Malik tilted his head. "They saving you?" Marcus's silence was answer enough, and Malik chuckled, shaking his head. "Didn't think so." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The shelter was restless, men coughing, children murmuring in their dreams. He stepped outside, the cold air biting at his skin. That's when he saw her Aisha sitting on the steps, her face tilted to the sky. "Can't sleep either?" Marcus asked. She didn't look at him, just kept staring upward. "Sleep feels dangerous lately. Like closing my eyes is giving permission for the world to shift without me." Marcus sat beside her. For a moment, silence was their language. Then she whispered, "I heard Raymond talking earlier. Something about a cane. Is it true?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "It's true." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you need to be careful. Cain doesn't just ruin people, he swallows them whole. I've seen it." Marcus turned sharply. "You've seen it?" She nodded, her eyes haunted. "My cousin worked for him. Thought he was climbing out of poverty when Cain offered him a job. He ended up buried in debt, threats on his family. One day he just disappeared. The police didn't ask questions. Nobody did." Marcus studied her face, the pain etched deep there. "And yet you still fight. You still feed people. You still stand here." She finally looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "Because if I don't, who will?" "Fear feeds Cain more than money does. I won't give him that." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, not anger, but a kind of respect that humbled him. "You're braver than most I've met." She gave a half smile, tired but real. "And you're not what you seem, Marcus. I don't know what you're hiding, but I know you're not just another man trying to survive." He didn't answer, because she was right, and because words weren't ready to betray the truth yet. Instead, he just said softly, "Maybe one day you'll know." In the days that followed, whispers of Cain grew louder. The men at the shelter spoke his name with reverence and dread. A delivery truck came by less often, and when food ran low, a rumor spread that Cain had redirected donations elsewhere. Hunger was his weapon, and the streets bent to it. Derek finally reappeared one afternoon, swaggering into the soup kitchen with two men at his side. The room stiffened. Children clutched their mothers. Aisha's hand froze mid-ladle. Derek's grin was wide and venomous. "Well, if it isn't the do-gooders. Feeding the poor, keeping the rats fat. You're welcome, by the way. Wouldn't be no kitchen if Cain didn't allow it." Marcus stepped forward slowly, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "Strange way to show charity, starving the people you claim to save." Derek's grin faltered for just a second, then sharpened again. "Careful, old man. Words like that get you noticed." Marcus tilted his head. "Good. I've been waiting to be noticed." A murmur ran through the room. Derek's men shifted uneasily, sensing something they couldn't name. Derek barked a laugh. "You got guts. I'll give you that. Cain's gonna love breaking you." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Derek could hear. "He'll find I'm not so easy to break." Derek's jaw twitched, but he masked it with a smirk. "We'll see." Then he turned and strutted out, his men following. The tension lingered long after they were gone. Malik exhaled shakily. "You just painted the biggest target of your life." Marcus glanced at him, calm as ever. "Targets don't scare me. Missing my shot does." That night, Marcus dreamed. He was back in the ring, sweat dripping, fists clenched, the roar of the crowd pounding in his ears. But his opponent wasn't a fighter. It was a man in a suit, faceless, his voice dripping like oil. "Everything has a price, Marcus, even your soul." He woke with a start, chest heaving, the echo of Cain's unseen face still haunting him. The following week brought escalation. Food deliveries ceased entirely. Children cried from hunger. Aisha's eyes darkened with fury, but her voice stayed steady. "We'll find another way." Marcus took her aside. "This isn't just about food. Kane's tightening the leash. He wants to see us break." She met his gaze. "Then we won't give him the satisfaction." Marcus nodded, but inside, he knew a line had been crossed. Kane had declared war, and wars weren't won with soup ladles. They were won with strategy, with resolve, with risk. That evening, as rain pounded the streets, Marcus found Raymond waiting in the alley, soaked and shaking. "He knows about you," Raymond rasped. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Kane?" Raymond nodded violently. "He's been asking questions. Where you came from? Why you're here? He's got eyes everywhere. You need to disappear before it's too late." Marcus stepped closer, his voice like iron. "I didn't come here to disappear. I came her." Their breaths still ragged from the fight. The papers clutched tight against Lila's chest, like a holy text in a world of lies. The city above seemed to shift with each step. Neon lights bleeding into puddles, shadows stretching like claws, every passing face a potential enemy. Marcus's jaw was set, his body bruised, but his mind sharper than ever, a storm of strategy unfolding behind his eyes. Malik limped slightly, but kept pace, adrenaline still humming in his veins, while Lila's eyes darted with paranoia, her fear carrying the weight of every secret they now carried. "You sure this friend of yours can be trusted?" Marcus asked, his voice low, the question slicing through the damp silence. Lila swallowed, her voice trembling but sure. "Naomi doesn't answer to anyone. She's lost jobs for refusing to spin stories. She lives for the truth. If anyone can get this out before Kane buries it, it's her," Malik snorted, half skeptical, half impressed. "Sounds like she's got more guts than most men in this city." Marcus nodded once, but his gaze swept the street, scanning every corner, every flicker of movement. He knew Kane would not waste time licking wounds. Retaliation was already forming in boardrooms, in alleys, in whispered phone calls that pulled strings of power Marcus could barely see. He could feel it in the way the air seemed charged, like a storm about to split the sky. They moved toward Naomi's loft, tucked above a forgotten bookstore on the city's edge. But as they approached, Marcus raised a hand, halting them. A black car sat across the street, its windows tinted, engine humming though no one sat inside. The hair on Marcus's neck bristled. "We're being watched," he murmured. Lila stiffened, clutching the papers tighter. "It's him, isn't it?" Marcus's gaze hardened. "Kane doesn't send cars to watch. He sends cars to warn. He wants us to know he's close." Malik spat on the ground, fists clenched. "Then let him come. I'm not running." Marcus's eyes flicked to him, a sharp look that cut through the boy's bravado. This isn't about pride. It's about survival. And survival means thinking 3 steps ahead. He led them through an alley, circling to the back entrance of the bookstore. The wooden stairs creaked as they climbed, the faint glow of light spilling from Naomi's loft above. Marcus knocked 3 times, deliberate, measured. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the door cracked open, revealing a woman with fierce eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, her curly hair tied in a messy knot, ink smudged on her fingers like a badge of honor.
"Lila?"
Naomi whispered, disbelief in her tone. "What the hell are you doing here?" Lila's voice cracked. "Naomi, it's happening. Kane, he's worse than we thought. We have proof. We need you." Naomi's eyes darted to Marcus and Malik, suspicion flickering before she opened the door wider. "Get in, quick." Inside, the loft smelled of ink and coffee, papers stacked high like towers of defiance, walls covered in clippings, photographs, strings connecting names and faces in a chaotic map of corruption. Naomi shut the door, locking it 3 times, then turned to face them. "Show me." Lila spread the documents on the table, her hands shaking. Naomi's eyes devoured the pages, her lips pressing tighter with each line she read. Embezzlement, laundering, property scams. My God. This isn't just Kane. This is a whole network. Politicians, contractors, half the city's elite tied up in this. Malik leaned against the wall, his chest still heaving. "Then blast it out. Put it online. Let the world see." Naomi shook her head, her voice firm. "It's not that simple. If I posted without context, without corroboration, they'll smear me, bury the story before it breathes." But if I can verify even part of this, if I can tie names to real cases, it becomes untouchable. Marcus studied her, respect flickering in his eyes. How long? Naomi sighed, running a hand through her hair. Days, maybe a week. Marcus's voice hardened. We don't have a week. Kane's already moving. He knows we're coming. Naomi looked up, her eyes narrowing. And who exactly are you? Marcus held her gaze. The silence waited. Then he spoke evenly. Someone who's seen what happens when men like Kane go unchecked. Someone who's not going to let it happen again. Naomi studied him, suspicion battling with something else, recognition maybe, or trust not yet earned. Before she could reply, glass shattered. A brick crashed through the window, scattering papers and shards across the floor. Attached was a note, scrawled in thick black ink. You can't save them, Lila gasped, her face pale. Malik cursed under his breath. Naomi clenched her fists, her jaw tight. Marcus picked up the brick, turning the note in his hand, his expression unreadable. He knows we're here, Marcus said quietly, and he wants us scared. Naomi's eyes flashed. Then let's give him something to fear instead. For the next hour, they worked in tense silence. Naomi scanned and encrypted documents, sending fragments to trusted contacts outside the city. Marcus and Malik reinforced the door, blocked the windows, eyes always on the street below where shadows shifted and lingered too long. Lila sat close, clutching her brother's photo, whispering prayers under her breath. When Naomi finally leaned back, exhaustion etched into her face, she said, It's begun. By tomorrow, pieces of this will surface. Not enough to topple Kane, but enough to shake his cage. Marcus nodded. And he'll thrash harder because of it. That night, they slept in shifts, the loft heavy with unease. Marcus sat by the window, his body aching but his mind racing. He thought of the man he used to be, the CEO in crisp suits, commanding rooms with a glance. He thought of the homeless man he became, stripped of identity, walking unseen through streets that spat on him. And he thought of Kane, a reflection of everything rotten he'd once battled inside himself, the hunger for control, the arrogance of invincibility. Sometime near dawn, Naomi stirred, padding softly to the window where Marcus sat. You're not what you seem, she whispered. Marcus's eyes stayed on the street. Neither is this city. She studied him in silence, then said, Whatever your past, it's clear you've been preparing for this fight a long time. He finally looked at her, his voice low. You don't survive men like Kane without scars. The question is whether we let those scars define us or drive us. She held his gaze, then nodded. Then let's drive. But the morning brought more than resolve. It brought fire. At sunrise, a boom rattled the street. They rushed to the window to see flames licking up the side of the bookstore. Someone had poured gasoline along the base and lit it like a fuse. Smoke billowed, neighbors screaming, the crackle of fire devouring wood. We have to get out now, Naomi shouted. They grabbed the documents, shoving them into bags as smoke filled the loft. Marcus led the way, guiding them down the back stairs, coughing through the haze. They burst into the alley, heat pressing against their backs, and ran until their lungs screamed. Behind them, the bookstore collapsed in flames. Years of Naomi's work consumed in minutes. She stopped, staring at the inferno, tears streaking her smoke-stained face. Everything's gone. Marcus gripped her shoulder, his voice like steel. Not everything. You still have the truth, and the truth is enough. But even as he said it, engines roared. Black SUVs screeched into the alley, doors flying open. Kane's men poured out, armed and ready. Marcus pushed Naomi and Lila behind him, his stance wide, his fists tight. Malik raised the stolen gun, his hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. Kane stepped from the lead car, his suit immaculate, his smirk venomous. You thought you could play me, he said, his voice calm, chilling. You thought you could burn my house down. But look around you, it's your house that burns. He gestured to the flames behind them, the ruin of Naomi's work. Marcus stepped forward, meeting his gaze, his voice like thunder. Houses can burn, empires can fall. But men like you, men who build on blood and lies, you always forget one thing. Kane tilted his head, amused. And what's that? Marcus's eyes blazed. The people you step on eventually rise. The air crackled, every soul in the alley poised on the edge of violence. Kane's smile faded, his eyes cold as ice. "Then let's see how high you can rise before I cut you down." And as his men raised their weapons, the city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see who would survive the fire that had finally been lit. The alley froze in silence. The only sound, the crackle of flames consuming Naomi's bookstore. The heat painting the walls orange while Kane's men stood in formation, guns raised, eyes hard, waiting for the order to kill. Marcus stepped forward, the weight of his past pressing against his ribs. The truth of who he really was, simmering just beneath the surface. No longer a burden, but a weapon waiting to be unleashed. His voice cut through the smoke like a blade. "You think this ends with your guns?" he said, steady, unflinching. "But you don't understand, Kane. This city is already turning on you. The fear you used to own, it doesn't belong to you anymore." Kane's smirk twitched, a crack in the mask, but he lifted a hand and snapped his fingers. Muzzles lifted higher, fingers sliding toward triggers. Malik raised the stolen pistol, sweat dripping from his temple but his aim unwavering. Lila clutched the bag of papers, her whole body trembling, her lips forming silent prayers. Naomi stood like a statue, fury burning behind her tear-stained glasses, her gaze fixed on Kane as if she could set him alight with will alone. The first shot never came. A shout rang out instead, echoing down the alley. "Leave them alone!" Figures spilled from the shadows. Homeless men and women Marcus had shared Bree.